While eating dinner, a dude from my class asked, "Since you're not gay anymore, how was sleeping with my sister?" "Wait, I lost my V card?" I asked, genuinely confused. Before I could say another word, he rocked me in the nose in front of everyone at the dining hall. "You better sleep with one eye open tonight, because you won't make it to tomorrow morning alive." Phoenix stormed off, leaving me sitting there bleeding into my dinner tray. Everyone in the cafeteria was staring, but nobody said anything. I grabbed some napkins and stumbled back to my dorm room trying to process what just happened. Phoenix thought I slept with his sister, but I had no memory of it. And apparently everyone thought I was gay, which was also news to me. My roommate Simon was playing video games when I walked in holding bloody napkins to my face. He paused his game and turned around looking concerned. "Dude, what happened to you?" I went to the sink and started cleaning up the blood. "Did I sleep with someone last night?" Simon laughed. "Yeah, dude, everyone heard you. The walls are thin and you weren't exactly quiet about it." This made no sense. I'd gone to a party last night, but everything after my third beer was a complete blank. I'd woken up alone in my bed wearing different clothes than I'd left in. Now apparently I'd hooked up with someone and couldn't remember any of it. "Who was it? Who did I sleep with?" I asked desperately. "I don't remember who it was. I just remember seeing her hair being a mess and her walking funny after she left your room. You should ask around." Simon went back to his game like I wasn't going to get my brain splattered on his wall. I checked my phone, but there were no texts or calls from last night. No clues about what happened. The clock on my desk showed 7:30 p.m. If Phoenix was serious about his threat, I needed to figure this out fast. I decided to start with our RA since he usually knew everything that happened on our floor. Alex's door was covered in motivational posters and a whiteboard for leaving messages. I knocked and heard him call out to come in. He was sitting at his desk studying for something but smiled when he saw me. "Hey man, do you know who I brought back to my room last night?" I asked. Alex's face lit up and he stood to dap me up. "Dude, I thought you were gay." Not that there's anything wrong with that, but everyone couldn't believe that after you went to Pound Town, a girl walked out your room. Why does everyone think I'm gay? This kept getting weirder. "Well, yeah. You never talk about girls and you're always hanging with theater kids. Plus you wear Skechers, dude." Alex shrugged like these were obvious signs. I wanted to argue but didn't have time. "So you didn't see who the girl was?" "Nah, but she was definitely from one of the lower floors where the girls live. Maybe check down there and see if you can find her. Wear a rubber this time." Alec went back to studying. I headed for the stairwell trying to think. How could I not remember hooking up with someone? And why did Phoenix care so much that I slept with his sister? Did she not tell him it was consensual? Was it even consensual if I couldn't remember it? My head was spinning, and not just from the punch. The girls' floors smelled like vanilla and flowers compared to the musty ball stench of the guy's area. I was walking slowly trying to figure out my next move when someone hugged me from behind. Soft arms wrapped around my waist, and lips pressed close to my ear. "James Charles. Did I get the gay out of you yet?" The voice was breathy and trying to be seductive. I turned around and almost jumped back in shock. It was Heidi, the campus chopped splish. She had stringy hair and bad skin, and always wore clothes that gave her a crazy camel toe. Behind her back, people called her mean names I'll get expelled for repeating. And apparently lucky me slept with her last night. "What do you mean?" I asked, dreading the answer. She smiled, showing crooked teeth. "I believe all men are straight. They just need to have an awakening. Lucky for you, I specialize in providing that awakening." My stomach turned. She'd targeted me because she thought I was gay and wanted to fix me, which meant she'd probably gotten me drunk on purpose, which meant last night wasn't exactly consensual on my end. I felt sick and violated and angry all at once. "Your brother is going to kill me," I said. "Yeah, he does that to the guys I date sometimes. He's very protective. He's scared I'll get pregnant again." There was a knock on her door. Must be my roommate's boyfriend. He always forgets his key. She opened the door and Phoenix's face appeared. His eyes went wide when he saw me standing in his sister's room. "Now you're in her room, you hornball!" Phoenix screamed, stepping inside. His hand shot forward and grabbed my shirt before I could move. He yanked me hard against the wall and Heidi started laughing, saying we should all just calm down and talk about this. Phoenix's fist slammed into my ribs, and all the air left my lungs at once. The pain was sharp and immediate, and I couldn't breathe for several seconds. I tried to gasp out that I was drunk last night and didn't remember anything, but the words came out broken and wheezy. Heidi stepped between us with this big smile on her face, telling Phoenix how she helped me discover I'm actually straight after all. Phoenix's face went from pure rage to confused in about 2 seconds as he processed what his sister just said. His grip on my shirt loosened slightly, and he turned to look at Heidi with this weird expression. He asked what she meant by helped, and I used that moment to start sliding toward the door. Heidi looked proud as she started explaining her whole theory about how all men are really straight and just need someone to awaken them. She kept talking about how she picked me specially because everyone said I was gay, and she wanted to prove her theory worked. Phoenix's mouth fell open as she basically admitted to targeting me on purpose. The door to the hallway was still open, and I could hear footsteps and voices getting closer. People were definitely coming to see what all the yelling was about. I managed to slip past Phoenix while he was staring at his sister in shock. The hallway was already filling up with people from other rooms, and at least 3 of them had their phones out recording everything. My ribs were throbbing with every step as I pushed through the crowd trying to get away from that room. Behind me, I could hear Phoenix starting to argue with Heidi about what she'd done. I half ran, half stumbled back up the stairs holding my side where he'd punched me. Every breath hurt, and I could feel the bruise already forming under my shirt. I made it to Alec's door and knocked hard, trying not to panic. He opened it right away, and his eyes went wide when he saw me hunched over holding my ribs. I told him Phoenix just attacked me again down in Heidi's room, and we needed help right now. Alec pulled me inside and grabbed his phone immediately, saying he was calling campus security. He explained to whoever answered that there was an assault happening, and we needed someone here fast. While he was on the phone, I sat on his desk chair trying to breathe normally, but my ribs hurt with every inhale. Alec hung up and said someone named Brooks Lancaster was on his way and should be here in 10 minutes. He asked if I needed to go to the health center, but I said I wanted to wait for security first. About 8 minutes later, there was a knock, and Alec let in this older guy in a campus security uniform. Brooks Lancaster was tall and had gray hair and looked like he'd dealt with stuff like this before. He took one look at me and pulled out his phone to start taking pictures. He had me lift my shirt and documented the red mark on my ribs that was already turning purple. Then he took photos of my nose from different angles, showing the dried blood and swelling from earlier. He sat down across from me with a notepad and asked me to explain everything that happened. I told him about waking up in different clothes with no memory of last night and how Heidi had just admitted she targeted me. I explained how she thought I was gay and wanted to fix me by getting me drunk at the party. Brooks wrote everything down and kept asking follow-up questions about what exactly Heidi had said. He said this sounded like way more than just a fight between guys and might be sexual assault. I felt my stomach drop because I hadn't really thought about it that way yet, but he was right. Brooks stood up and said he needed to go talk to Phoenix and Heidi while the situation was still fresh. He told me to stay here with Alec and he'd be back as soon as he could. Alec made me some tea while we waited and kept saying I was doing the right thing by reporting this. He said he'd had no idea Heidi was doing stuff like this and felt bad for not noticing something was wrong. We sat there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 45 minutes before Brooks came back. He looked tired, but also kind of satisfied as he sat back down across from me. He said Phoenix had admitted to both attacks when confronted with the evidence and witnesses. Heidi had also confirmed she gave me special drinks to help me discover myself, or whatever she called it. Brooks said they were both getting interim suspensions effective immediately pending a full investigation. He explained that meant they couldn't come on campus or contact me in any way until this was sorted out. He gave me his card and said I'd need to come to the security office tomorrow to file a full report. He also strongly suggested I go to the health center to get checked out and maybe talk to someone about what happened. After he left, I went back to my room where Simon was still playing his game like nothing had happened. I couldn't focus on anything and kept thinking about those missing hours from last night. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through my photos from yesterday to see if there were any clues. There were pictures I didn't remember taking from the party, showing me getting more and more messed up as the night went on. In every photo, Heidi was somewhere nearby holding red plastic cups and watching me with this weird smile. The last photo was blurry but showed her leading me somewhere, and I looked barely able to walk straight. I sat there staring at the screen until my eyes burned, and finally put the phone down when a knock came at my door around midnight. Simon stood in the hallway looking down at his feet and said he was sorry for not realizing something bad had happened, and that he'd heard me through the walls sounding too drunk to consent, and would testify if I needed him to. I thanked him and went back to bed, but couldn't sleep thinking about everything that had happened. The next morning, I dragged myself to the health center, where the nurse took me to a private exam room and had me change into a hospital gown. She took photos of the bruises on my ribs and nose, then drew several vials of blood for testing, while explaining they needed to check for drugs and document everything properly. She was gentle but professional, as she swabbed different areas and sealed each sample in evidence bags with labels and signatures. The whole process took over an hour and left me feeling even more violated than before. When I got back to my dorm, there was a voicemail from someone named Valerie Whitaker asking me to come to the Title IX office as soon as possible. I walked across campus to the administration building and found her office on the 3rd floor behind a door marked Student Services. Valerie was an older woman with gray hair who stood up and shook my hand firmly before closing the door and offering me water. She explained that Brooks had filed a report about what happened, and she needed to interview me about the assault to determine next steps, including possibly pressing criminal charges against Heidi for rape. The word rape made my stomach twist, but she was right about what had happened, even if I couldn't remember it. I told her everything from waking up in different clothes to Heidi admitting she targeted me to fix my supposed gayness. Valerie typed notes on her computer and asked detailed questions about the party and what I could remember before the blackout. She showed me a form for filing a formal complaint and explained that Heidi's actions were planned and deliberate, which made this especially serious. I signed the papers, and she said the investigation would take several weeks, but they'd already issued no contact orders, keeping both Phoenix and Heidi away from me during that time. Word spread across campus faster than I expected, and by that afternoon my phone was blowing up with messages from other guys saying Heidi had tried similar things with them. 3 students came to my room over the next 2 days, telling me she'd gotten them drunk at parties and made aggressive moves when they were wasted. But they'd managed to get away or had friends intervene. They all said they'd file reports too now that someone else had come forward first. At lunch later that week, a girl named Kaylee Acevedo sat down next to me carrying her laptop and said she'd been at her party that night and had videos I needed to see. She opened a folder full of clips from different angles showing the party in full swing with people dancing and drinking everywhere. In several videos I could see myself in the background, getting progressively more messed up as the night went on with Heidi always hovering nearby. The last video made my blood run cold, as it clearly showed Heidi leading me toward the door, while I stumbled and could barely walk straight with her arm wrapped around my waist, practically dragging me along. Kaylee said she'd already sent the videos to Valerie and would testify about what she saw that night. A few days later, I was walking to the library when Phoenix appeared on the sidewalk ahead of me with his fists clenched. Before he could take a step toward me, Brooks Lancaster seemed to materialize out of nowhere and stepped between us holding up his hand. Phoenix backed away but yelled that his sister wasn't a rapist, and I was lying about everything before Brooks escorted him away while speaking into his radio. My hands were shaking as I went into the library and found a quiet corner to calm down. The next week, Valerie scheduled me an appointment with a counselor who specialized in sexual assault cases and male victims. The counselor's office had soft lighting and comfortable chairs, and she let me talk at my own pace about everything that had happened. She helped me understand that being assaulted didn't change who I was or my sexuality, and that predators often target people they perceive as vulnerable. We talked about how Heidi had deliberately gotten me drunk to incapacitate me, and how that was rape regardless of what she believed about fixing people. The counselor gave me worksheets and coping strategies to deal with the trauma and scheduled weekly sessions to help me process everything. During the investigation, Emily Malone came forward to testify about living with Heidi and witnessing her behavior. She told Valerie that Heidi had brought special drinks just for me to the party and had been bragging for weeks about her plan to convert gay guys. Emily said Heidi specifically believed that converting gay men was her calling from God, and she'd been researching ways to get guys drunk enough to go along with her plans. She had screenshots of Heidi's internet searches about date rape drugs and alcohol combinations that would make someone black out but still be functional enough for sex. The housing office called me in and said for my safety, they were moving me to a single room in a different building immediately. They had maintenance help me pack and move my stuff to a quieter dorm on the other side of campus, where I finally felt like I could breathe without everyone watching and whispering about what had happened to me. 2 weeks crawled by with me jumping at every noise in my new room and checking my phone constantly for updates. The health center finally called saying my test results were ready and I needed to come in right away. I practically ran across campus to the medical building, where the nurse sat me down with a serious look on her face. She showed me the lab report, which had all these numbers and medical terms I didn't understand at first. My blood alcohol level from that night was twice the legal limit for driving, which explained the blackout. But there was something else in my system too that the nurse said wasn't any recreational drug students usually took. She explained someone had definitely drugged me with something designed to make me unable to resist or remember what happened. I took photos of the test results with shaking hands, knowing this was proof I hadn't consented to anything that night. The next day, Valerie called me into her office looking stressed and warned me things were about to get complicated. Heidi's parents had hired some expensive lawyer who was already trying to spin the whole thing as consensual experimentation between curious students. The lawyer was claiming I'd been questioning my sexuality, and Heidi was just helping me explore in a safe environment. Valerie said they'd probably try to use the rumors about me being gay to make it seem like I wanted this to happen. She told me to stay strong and stick to the facts because the evidence was on my side no matter what lies they tried to spread. That afternoon, I got a text from someone I'd never talked to before, saying they had information about Heidi I needed to see. We met at the library where this guy showed me screenshots of messages between Heidi and some dealer from weeks before the party. She was asking really specific questions about drugs that would make someone compliant, but not completely unconscious. The messages showed her researching dosages and asking how to mix stuff into drinks without changing the taste too much. This guy said he'd already sent everything to Valerie and would testify if needed, because what Heidi did was messed up. The investigation was moving faster now, and Valerie scheduled me to give an official recorded statement about that night. I sat in a small room with a camera pointed at me, while 2 administrators asked me to describe everything I remembered. Talking about waking up in different clothes made me want to throw up, but I pushed through the details. I had to explain finding evidence on my sheets and body that proved something sexual had happened, even though I had zero memory of it. They asked about my alcohol tolerance and whether I'd ever blacked out before, from just 3 beers, which I hadn't. The whole thing took 2 hours, and by the end I was exhausted from reliving the worst night of my life over and over. 3 days later, I was eating lunch when Brooks found me and said Phoenix had been arrested that morning. Campus security had pulled the dining hall footage, which clearly showed him punching me unprovoked while I was just sitting there. His threats about killing me in front of witnesses upgraded the assault charges to felony level, according to Brooks. Phoenix was being held at the county jail and had been expelled effective immediately for violent conduct. I felt relieved knowing he couldn't come after me anymore, but also weird about him sitting in an actual jail cell. Simon came to find me that evening looking really upset and said he needed to tell me something important. He'd given his statement to the investigators about what he heard through our thin walls that night. He admitted hearing me yelling no and stop multiple times, but thought it was just rough consensual stuff. Simon kept apologizing, saying he should have checked on me when he heard what sounded like distress. He felt terrible for assuming everything was fine and not realizing I was assaulted right next door. The guilt was eating him up, and he promised to testify about what he heard to help my case. A week later, Valerie called me back in with news that made everything even worse than I'd imagined. The investigation had uncovered at least 5 other guys Heidi had done this to over the past 2 years. Each one was someone she thought was gay and believed needed to be awakened through forced sexual contact. Some guys had transferred schools and others just never reported it because they were too ashamed or confused. Valerie said they were building a pattern of predatory behavior that would make Heidi's expulsion basically guaranteed. Alec knocked on my door that night saying he was organizing an emergency floor meeting about consent and bystander intervention. He felt horrible that so many people had heard something that night, but nobody thought to check if I was okay. The meeting was packed with guys looking uncomfortable, but Alec pushed through talking about recognizing signs of assault. He brought in counselors to explain that consent can't happen when someone is that drunk, and hearing distress sounds means you should always check. Alec became like a different person after this, and started putting up posters about assault prevention everywhere. People started treating me differently once word spread about what really happened that night. Guys who'd never talked to me before stopped me in the hallway to say Phoenix was wrong for attacking me. Even some of Phoenix's own friends reached out, saying they had no idea what Heidi had been doing. One of them told me Phoenix was starting to realize his sister had serious problems he'd been ignoring for years. The support from unexpected places made me feel less alone in dealing with all this trauma and legal stuff. After 6 weeks of investigation, Valerie called me in to hear the final Title IX determination. The panel had found Heidi responsible for sexual assault with clear evidence of premeditation through the drugging. She was expelled immediately and banned from ever setting foot on campus property again. Her name would be on a list preventing her from enrolling at any other state school in the system. Valerie said this was one of the strongest findings she'd seen because the evidence was overwhelming. I walked out of that office feeling validated, but also empty because nothing could undo what had happened to me. 2 weeks later, Phoenix stood in front of the judge at the county courthouse with his lawyer beside him looking nervous. The prosecutor read out the assault charges from both the dining hall attack and when he punched me in Heidi's room. Phoenix pleaded guilty to both counts while his parents sat in the gallery looking disappointed. The judge asked him why he attacked me, and Phoenix mumbled something about protecting his sister and thinking I took advantage of her. The judge cut him off and said protective instincts don't excuse violence, and Phoenix needed to learn better ways to handle conflict. She sentenced him to 2 years probation and 60 hours of anger management classes plus community service. Phoenix had to sign papers agreeing to stay away from me and the campus for the whole probation period. His lawyer tried to argue for lighter punishment, but the judge said Phoenix was lucky not to get jail time for the threats. Meanwhile, Heidi hired a lawyer to appeal her expulsion to the college board, claiming she was just helping me discover my true self. The appeals hearing happened in a conference room with 3 board members reviewing all the evidence Valerie had collected. Heidi sat there in a business suit trying to look professional, while her lawyer argued she had good intentions. The board members asked about the drugging, and Heidi claimed she just gave me strong drinks to help me relax. They pulled up the text messages where she asked about date rape drugs, and her lawyer couldn't explain those away. After an hour of back and forth, the board upheld the expulsion, saying Heidi was clearly a danger to other students. Her lawyer tried one more argument about mental health issues, but the board said that didn't excuse sexual assault. Heidi stormed out of the room yelling that she was trying to help people, and the college didn't understand her mission. The counselor I'd been seeing suggested I join a support group for male assault survivors that met every Thursday evening. I walked into my first meeting feeling weird about being there, but saw 8 other guys sitting in a circle. The facilitator had us go around and share our stories if we felt comfortable, and I realized these guys had been through similar stuff. One guy talked about his female boss who wouldn't take no for an answer, and another about waking up confused after a party. Nobody judged or questioned whether we were really victims since we were guys, which felt different from other reactions. We talked about the shame and confusion of not remembering what happened and how people don't believe men can be assaulted. The facilitator gave us worksheets about recognizing trauma responses and coping strategies that actually helped. I started going every week, and it became the one place where I didn't have to explain or defend what happened to me. 3 months after everything started, I was actually doing better with regular therapy, and the support group helping me process things. The gay rumors on campus had completely stopped once people understood what really happened to me that night. Friends who used to avoid the topic now checked in on me and asked how I was handling everything. Simon had become a real friend instead of just a roommate, and made sure I felt safe in our dorm. Even people I barely knew would nod at me with respect instead of pity, which made walking around campus easier. My grades had recovered from the mess of dealing with investigations, and I was catching up on missed assignments. The therapy was helping me understand that being assaulted didn't change who I was, or my sexuality like I'd worried about. I could go to parties again, though I stayed sober and always had someone watching my drinks just to be safe. Then one afternoon, Alec knocked on my door, holding an envelope with my name written on it in messy handwriting. He said Phoenix had sent it to him to give to me since he couldn't contact me directly because of the restraining order. I opened it and found 2 pages of Phoenix apologizing for attacking me and saying he understood now that his sister hurt me. He wrote that he was in therapy too, dealing with years of enabling Heidi's behavior and ignoring warning signs. He said he knew she had this obsession with converting gay guys, but never thought she'd actually assault anyone. His therapist was helping him understand how he'd been making excuses for her predatory behavior for years. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just wanted me to know he finally understood what really happened that night. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer, not sure how to feel about his apology. Around the same time, the college administration announced new policies about drugging and targeting students based on perceived sexuality. They made everyone attend mandatory training sessions about consent that specifically addressed predatory behavior and targeting. The trainings talked about how consent can't happen when someone is incapacitated and how targeting someone's identity is assault. They updated the student handbook with stricter punishments for drugging and created a better reporting system for assault. Alec became one of the peer educators running these sessions and used what happened to me as an example with my permission. 6 months after the assault, the prosecutor's office called saying Heidi's criminal trial was starting and they needed my testimony. I walked into the courthouse wearing my only suit and trying not to throw up from nerves about seeing her again. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with Heidi sitting at the defense table in a conservative dress, trying to look innocent. I took the witness stand and the prosecutor asked me to describe what I remembered from that night and finding out what happened. I talked about waking up in different clothes with no memory and Heidi admitting she targeted me to fix my supposed gayness. The defense lawyer tried to make it seem like I was confused or lying, but I stuck to the facts about the drugging and assault. After my testimony, other victims took the stand, including 2 guys who'd transferred schools because of what Heidi did to them. Each one described the same pattern of Heidi targeting them because she thought they were gay and drugging them at parties. One guy broke down crying, describing waking up confused and violated, just like I had that morning. The prosecutor showed the pattern of predatory behavior, with evidence of Heidi researching date rape drugs and targeting specific students. She called Heidi a serial rapist who used social assumptions about masculinity as cover for her crimes. The defense lawyer tried to argue that Heidi had a mental condition that made her believe she was genuinely helping people discover themselves. The judge immediately shut this down, saying mental illness doesn't excuse rape, and Heidi clearly knew what she was doing. The jury went to deliberate and came back after only 2 hours with guilty verdicts on all counts of sexual assault and drugging. The judge sentenced Heidi to 5 years in state prison and lifetime registration as a sex offender. Heidi's parents cried in the gallery while she got handcuffed and led away, still insisting she'd been trying to help people. 3 weeks after the sentencing, Alec knocked on my door holding his phone and looking uncomfortable. He said Phoenix had been texting him for days, asking if I'd be willing to meet somewhere neutral with someone else present to talk about everything that happened. I stared at Alec trying to process this request while my stomach did flips. Part of me wanted to tell Phoenix to go to hell after everything, but another part needed closure on this whole mess. I told Alec I'd think about it and let him know by tomorrow. That night, I couldn't focus on homework and kept weighing whether meeting Phoenix would help or just open old wounds. I texted my therapist asking her opinion, and she said it could be helpful if done safely with clear boundaries. The next morning, I found Alec in the dining hall and said I'd meet Phoenix, but only with campus security, present in a public place, during daytime. Alec nodded and started texting while I pushed eggs around my plate, feeling anxious about seeing Phoenix again. 2 days later, we met in a conference room at the student union with Brooks, sitting in the corner watching us both carefully. Phoenix looked different, thinner and tired with dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't been sleeping well. He sat across from me and stared at the table for a long moment before speaking. "I'm sorry for hitting you and threatening you. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it." His voice was quiet and shaky. I nodded but didn't say anything, waiting for him to continue. Phoenix explained he'd been in therapy since his arrest, and finally understood how badly he'd failed his sister by ignoring her behavior for years. He said he knew about her obsession with converting gay guys, but always made excuses and never thought she'd actually hurt anyone. His therapist helped him see how he'd been enabling a predator by not getting her help when the warning signs were obvious. Phoenix said he wasn't asking for forgiveness, just wanted me to know he finally understood what really happened that night. I took a deep breath and told him I accepted his apology for the violence, but we could never be friends after everything. He nodded like he expected this and said he was transferring to a school 3 states away to start fresh where nobody knew about any of this. Phoenix stood up to leave, then turned back and said he hoped I was doing okay with everything. I watched him walk out feeling lighter somehow, like a weight had lifted off my chest. 6 months after that night, everything happened. I was sitting in my therapist's office realizing I'd gone a whole week without nightmares. My grades had recovered from nearly failing to Dean's List, and I'd even started dating someone from my economics class who knew my whole story and didn't care. The support groups helped more than I expected, talking to other guys who'd been through similar stuff and understood the confusion and shame. My new single room felt like a safe space where I could actually relax and sleep, without jumping at every noise in the hallway. Kaylee found me at the library one day and handed me an invitation to a party she was throwing, specifically making sure I knew I was welcome and supported. I showed up early and stayed sober the whole time, leaving after an hour but feeling good about reclaiming that social space on my own terms. People at the party treated me normally, not like a victim or someone to pity, which felt better than I expected. A month later, the dean's office called asking if I'd speak at freshman orientation about consent and recognizing predatory behavior. I agreed, even though public speaking terrified me, because maybe my story could help someone else avoid what happened to me. Standing in front of 300 new students, I explained how predators target people they think are vulnerable and use alcohol or drugs to incapacitate victims. I talked about how assault can happen to anyone regardless of gender, and it's never the victim's fault for trusting someone. After my speech, 5 students came up privately to thank me, and one guy asked for resources because something similar happened to him in high school. My parents found out everything after the trial when a reporter called them for comment on the story. Mom cried for hours, blaming herself for not knowing, while Dad got quiet and angry at everyone involved. We started family therapy sessions over video calls, where we worked through their guilt and my anger at having to handle everything alone at first. They became fierce advocates, joining support groups for parents and donating to organizations that help assault survivors. Simon knocked on my door one night carrying pizza and asked if we could talk about everything that happened. He apologized for not recognizing the signs that night and for laughing when I first asked about it. We spent hours talking about consent and bystander intervention while he asked questions about what to watch for at parties. Simon started checking on drunk people at parties and calling out guys who made jokes about getting girls wasted. We became actual friends instead of just roommates, playing video games and studying together without the weird tension from before. A year after the assault, student government selected me for a new position focused on campus safety and survivor resources. I pushed for better lighting in dark areas, more security cameras, and mandatory consent education for all Greek life members. The counseling center director asked me to help design a program specifically for male assault survivors, since my case showed how underserved that population was. They hired 2 new counselors trained in male trauma and created support groups that met weekly in a private location. Looking at everything that happened, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I was proud of turning trauma into purpose. Spring semester flew by with finals and graduation prep, while I worked on my commencement speech about resilience and community support. Standing at the podium in my cap and gown, I looked out at thousands of people, including my parents who'd flown in that morning. My hands shook holding the pages, but once I started talking about how this campus taught me that trauma doesn't define you, the words just flowed. The crowd went silent when I explained how support from unexpected places helped me rebuild after being assaulted. When I finished, everyone stood up clapping and my mom was crying in the front row. After the ceremony, Alec found me by the refreshment tables and pulled me aside. "You inspired me to apply to law school," he said. "I want to be a prosecutor who specializes in sexual assault cases because of what you went through." That summer, a state senator's office called asking if I'd testify about my case for new legislation on campus drugging. I drove 4 hours to the Capitol and sat in front of a committee explaining how predators use alcohol and drugs to target victims. They passed the bill 3 months later, with mandatory minimums for drugging someone and stricter campus reporting requirements. The Scholarship Committee for Graduate School apparently cried reading my essay about transforming trauma into advocacy, according to the acceptance letter. They offered me full tuition plus living expenses for their social work program starting in the fall. I packed up my apartment and moved across the country to start fresh in a city where nobody knew my story. 2 years after that awful night, I was actually happy living in my new place with a job I loved and friends who became like family. Therapy gave me tools to handle the bad days, which still came sometimes, but didn't knock me down like before. My apartment had plants everywhere and photos from trips with my chosen family who accepted all of me. Phoenix's letter arrived forwarded from my old dorm address with no return label. Inside, he wrote that he was in therapy learning about consent and now volunteered teaching young men about respect and boundaries. He didn't ask for forgiveness or try to excuse what he did, just wanted me to know he understood now and was trying to be better. I threw the letter away, but felt something shift inside me like a weight lifting. The nonprofit hired me full-time after graduation to help male assault survivors navigate the legal system and find resources. Every guy who walked through our doors reminded me why this work mattered even when it was hard. Some days I'd sit with someone going through exactly what I went through and help them see there was a path forward. Other days I'd advocate in court or train police officers about male victims needing support too. My supervisor said I had a gift for making people feel heard and believed, which came from living through it myself. 3 years out from the assault, I was training new advocates and speaking at conferences about supporting male survivors. Looking back at everything, I wouldn't choose what happened, but I was proud of who I became through healing. The assault didn't define me, but learning to rise from it shaped everything good in my life now. Thanks for sticking with me through all those twists and turns. What a ride that was. Always love sharing the journey with you, and I'll see you in the next one. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.